You say you want freedom. You tell yourself that once you quit your job, hit a certain number in your bank account, or become your own boss, you'll finally be free. No more alarms, no more rules, no more middle managers breathing down your neck, just space, peace, and total autonomy. But here's the thing. Most people aren't chasing freedom, they're chasing permission. Permission to feel powerful without guilt. Permission to want more without shame. Permission to live without someone else's blueprint, but only if they still get a round of applause for doing it. You think you want to be untethered, but the moment the rope is cut, you freeze. Because now you have to steer. Like this video? You're in the right place. We don't do surface-level advice. This channel explores the psychological traps baked into money, identity, and power, so you can see your life with colder clarity and act with sharper precision. If that sounds like your kind of truth, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone stuck in a cage they built themselves. Let's talk about that cage. Freedom is romantic in theory. You picture it as wide open skies, quiet mornings, full control. But what you really want is controlled freedom, leashed independence. Enough wiggle room to feel bold, but not so much that you might actually get lost. Because real freedom, it's not comfortable. It's not glamorous. It's terrifying. Ask anyone who's been fired, divorced, abandoned, or dumped into deep uncertainty. They technically have more freedom now, but it feels like drowning. You're not weird for panicking in the face of freedom. It's instinct. Because for most of human history, freedom was a liability. It meant you weren't protected by the group. It meant you had to fend for yourself. Biologically, your brain equates structure with safety, even if that structure is miserable. That's why prisoners get anxious the day before release. That's why soldiers miss war. That's why people stay in bad jobs and worse relationships, not because they're stupid, but because certainty, even painful certainty, feels safer than the unknown. This is where the lie starts. You say you want to be free, but when you're finally free to choose, your first instinct is to ask someone else what you should do. You look for a course, a coach, a template, a YouTube video. You open 100 tabs searching for the right way to be free, because freedom without direction feels like punishment. The irony is brutal. You crave escape, but once you're out, all you want is a map. This is why people self-sabotage just as they're about to break free. The artist who finally goes full-time but suddenly loses inspiration. The employee who gets promoted and immediately feels imposter syndrome. The business owner who finally makes money, then burns out or blows it all. They didn't just fear failure, they feared the weight of freedom. Because if you're free, then it's all on you. No one to blame, no one to save you, just your choices staring back at you. And here's the sick part. If your freedom doesn't look impressive enough, you'll start bending your life again just to earn validation. You'll make free choices that are just socially approved versions of success. Because being autonomous is terrifying, but being invisible, even worse. So what happens? You start building a life that looks free, but feels like the same old cage. You become your own boss, but recreate the exact 9-to-5 structure because it feels productive. You move to a new city, but immediately plug into a new identity group because you don't want to feel alone. You start a passion project, but feel weird unless someone tells you it's good enough. The more control you get, the more lost you feel. And instead of examining that, you double down on performance. You build a freedom costume, something that looks bold and brave, even if it's stitched together from the same fear you swore you left behind. You don't want total freedom. You want someone to say, it's okay to do what you want. You want a note from the teacher, a pat on the head, a gold star for coloring outside the lines, but only if the lines are invisible. And the market knows it. Watch how self-help brands sell you freedom. It's always dressed up as structure. Build your dream life in 5 easy steps. Unlock financial freedom with our proven system. Design your life your way using our templates. It's a paradox. They're selling you permission slips disguised as empowerment. And you buy them, not because you're weak, but because full-spectrum freedom doesn't just require power, it requires trust in yourself. And that's something most people never learned. Most people were taught obedience from birth, at school, at work, even in love. Obedience looks like waiting for your turn, asking before acting, needing confirmation before believing you're right. So when you're finally untethered, your brain panics. You feel like a toddler lost in a supermarket. So many options, no idea what aisle you're in, and worst of all, no one coming to get you. That's not freedom. That's free fall. And unless you know how to build meaning from within, you'll spend your so-called freedom running in circles, hunting for someone to hand you a script again. Because the truth is, you don't want freedom. You want permission to want what you want. You want someone to tell you, yes, you're allowed to do this. Yes, it's safe now. Yes, you'll still be loved. But real freedom doesn't come with that kind of comfort. It's lonely. It's quiet. It's full of moments where you look around and realize no one's coming to tell you if you're doing it right.
You probably think success will fix this. More money, more options, a bigger title, more respect. The dream scenario? Wake up when you want, do work you care about, answer to no one but yourself. But let's look at what actually happens. You climb, you grind, you push past limits, and then you hit it, whatever your personal definition of making it is. At first, there's euphoria. You did it. You bought back your time. No boss, no schedule, no constraints. Then something strange happens. You wake up late because you can. But instead of feeling energized, you feel foggy, directionless. You have all this time to build your next thing, but you find yourself procrastinating, doom scrolling, waiting for a spark that doesn't come. You go out with friends, and they're impressed. You're so lucky. But deep down, you feel fraudulent, drifting, unanchored. What happened? Success didn't give you freedom. It gave you more decisions to make, with higher stakes and no instruction manual. And if you're not ready for that kind of autonomy, it doesn't feel like liberation. It feels like free-floating anxiety. Here's the truth nobody tells you about freedom at the top. You don't get a break from self-doubt. You don't stop feeling lost sometimes. You just run out of people to blame. Because now, you're the one in charge. You thought climbing the ladder would mean finally escaping the system. But you didn't realize that success just hands you the keys to your own private prison, one where the walls are made of choices and the guard is your own guilt. This is why so many high achievers crash right after a big win. The startup founder who sells her company then spirals into depression. The actor who finally lands the lead role but suddenly can't sleep. The athlete who wins gold then quietly retires at their peak. We assume they're ungrateful for the freedom they fought for. But that's not it. They're terrified. Because now they're the ones who have to decide what matters. And they never learned how. You've spent years climbing a mountain. Success is reaching the summit. But no one tells you the summit is quiet, isolated, windy and cold. And once you're there, You realize there's no obvious next step. You're free to go in any direction, but which one leads somewhere meaningful? Which one won't undo everything you just built? That's the paralysis, the trap. You used to know who to impress, what rules to follow. Now, you're supposed to be the architect. And most people, especially high-functioning people, are trained executors, not self-directed creators. This is why freedom often collapses into burnout, because success without structure is overwhelming. And in the panic, you end up recreating the very systems you once tried to escape. You start setting stricter work hours for yourself, not because you need them, but because you don't trust yourself with open space. You begin obsessing over productivity, not passion, because measurable output feels safer than vague potential. You micromanage your calendar, force routines, track habits, not because they help you flourish, but because they help you feel contained. Freedom becomes a new performance, a new burden, a new mask. You can wear jeans to the office, but you still feel like you need a reason to go in at all. You can work from anywhere, but suddenly, that makes you feel more untethered, not less. Here's a cold insight. You were never taught how to own your freedom. You were only taught how to earn it. And when something has to be earned, it always comes with strings. So even when you finally have control over your time, your money, your life, you feel like you need to deserve it constantly. You overwork to justify the privilege. You downplay your success so people won't think you're arrogant. You make your freedom smaller, quieter, more palatable so it doesn't threaten anyone, including yourself. Because deep down, you still want someone to tell you, yes, you're allowed to enjoy this. Yes, you're doing it right. Yes, it's okay to stop climbing. But freedom doesn't come with applause, or guidance, or medals. It just sits there, empty, silent, asking you, now what? And if you don't have an answer, if your success was built on proving something, escaping something, impressing someone, then you'll feel emptier than before. This is why success isn't the answer to your longing for freedom. It's just a different phase of the same hunger. Because here's the secret nobody wants to admit. Most people are addicted to climbing. They don't want to arrive. Arriving means stillness, and stillness forces reflection. And reflection, that's where it gets uncomfortable. Because now you have to ask real questions. Like, what do I actually care about? What kind of life feels worth living, not just worth bragging about? Am I building something that reflects who I am, or just something that gets applause? These questions don't come with shortcuts. They don't have top 10 list answers. They don't go viral. But they're the only way out of the success trap. Because if you don't answer them, you'll just keep building bigger cages, more money, more validation, more power, but still trapped inside the fear of messing it up. So yes, freedom is scary. But success? Success without meaning? That's worse. That's a treadmill disguised as a throne. And you'll keep running until you finally see that the goal isn't to climb higher, it's to get off the structure entirely. But before you can do that, you have to understand why structure feels so safe in the first place.
So, let's get brutally honest. You don't follow rules because you believe in them. You follow rules because they make life easier to navigate. When someone gives you a schedule, a checklist, a formula, you breathe easier. Even if you resent it, part of you clings to it. Because rules give you a direction. Rules protect you from the crushing responsibility of inventing your own. This isn't a character flaw, it's conditioning. From your earliest memories, you were trained to seek permission. You asked to go to the bathroom, you waited your turn, you raised your hand. You got stars for compliance, warnings for rebellion. So what did your brain learn? That safety equals obedience, that love is earned by doing it right, and that freedom, real, unfiltered, creative independence, is dangerous, selfish, or just plain wrong. It goes deeper. Even when the cage is gone, the patterns stay. You leave the job, but your internal manager still micromanages you. You stop following the rules, but your decisions still revolve around what would make others proud or jealous or impressed. Here's the terrifying truth. You're never really free until you unlearn obedience. And unlearning obedience is not as simple as just stop following the rules, because most rules aren't written down, they're internalized. They sound like, you can't rest unless you've earned it. Success must be hard to be valid. If no one's watching, it doesn't count. Freedom should look productive. Let that last one land. We've been trained to treat freedom like a business asset, something to optimize, something that must produce visible results. So even when you have a full day to yourself, you feel guilty if you waste it. You shame yourself for not doing more. You scroll through content from people who use their freedom better and wonder what's wrong with you. What's wrong is you were never taught how to be free. You were only taught how to be good. And good people follow rules. Good people ask for permission. Good people wait until someone says, now you can. Here's the pisological twist. Even rebellion becomes its own kind of obedience. You leave the system, but then conform to a new identity, the creative, the hustler, the digital nomad, the self-made, and every one of those identities comes with its own rules. You're free, but only if you wake up early, journal, drink adaptogens, meditate, hit the gym, crush your goals, and look great doing it. Same cage, just better lighting. This is why most people aren't ready for freedom, not because they're lazy, but because they're addicted to being told who to be. There's comfort in it. Comfort in knowing what's expected. Comfort in being graded. Comfort in having a recipe, even if it tastes like cardboard. And here's the coldest part. Rules don't just protect you. They protect your relationships. Because when you obey the rules, people know what to expect. You're reliable, predictable, safe. You don't threaten their worldview. You don't force them to confront their own choices. But when you stop playing by those rules, when you build a life that makes no sense on paper, you stop being safe. You become confusing, polarizing, sometimes even repellent. That's the cost of real freedom, disapproval. Because when you act without asking, people assume you're selfish. When you create without conforming, people call you arrogant. When you choose peace over productivity, they think you've given up. You haven't. You've just stopped asking for permission. And that terrifies people who still depend on it. So what do? You water yourself down. You tweak your choices so they still look familiar. You keep the wildness locked behind curated branding and polite smiles. You live a life that's yours, but only 70% yours. The rest is borrowed aesthetics, permission dressed up as originality. Because deep down, the child inside you still whispers, "Am I allowed to be this free?" And if the answer isn't instantly yes, you shrink again. Let's talk survival instinct. Obedience is a survival strategy, especially in systems where questioning authority got you punished, especially in families where love came with strings, especially in schools where creativity got you labeled difficult. So now, when you're finally in a position to choose for yourself, your nervous system doesn't celebrate, it scans for danger. It begs for a rule book. This is why people will literally pay thousands of dollars for someone to tell them how to be free. Not because they're dumb, but because they're terrified of making the wrong choice and being punished by society, their peers, their parents, themselves. So what do? They build structures inside their freedom. And that's not always bad. Routines, systems, and habits can help you stay grounded. But ask yourself, is this structure helping you thrive? Or is it just recreating a cage that feels safer than open air? Because here's what most people don't realize until it's too late. Structure should serve your freedom, not replace it. When structure becomes the goal, you've just traded one form of obedience for another. You think you're self-disciplined, but really, you're still scared of what happens when no one's watching. This is the heart of it. Freedom is not the absence of structure, it's the ability to choose your structure, to burn it down when it stops serving you, to walk away without explanation, to write your own script, then rewrite it tomorrow. But that means letting go of needing permission. It means disappointing people. It means being misunderstood. It means trusting your own rhythm even when it looks lazy to others. It means living a life that doesn't always look impressive, but feels aligned. That's what you say you want. But are you actually ready for that level of ownership? Because most people aren't.
You say you want freedom, but what you really want is to be understood. You want to express yourself without being punished for it. You want to make weird, beautiful, deeply personal decisions and still be loved afterward. You want to live outside the lines without being exiled from the page. This isn't weak, it's human. Because here's the thing most self-help books won't say. Autonomy is lonely. Not at first. At first, it feels like power. Finally, you get to call the shots. Finally, you don't have to explain your life to people who don't get it. But give it time. Eventually, freedom stops feeling like spaciousness and starts feeling like disconnection. You notice people don't know how to relate to you anymore. They can't track your journey, so they start assuming the worst. Or, worse, they stop asking entirely. You made yourself ungovernable, but now you're uninvited too. Let's break this down. Humans are social animals. Belonging is a survival need, not a bonus prize. For most of our history, exile meant death. So your brain is wired to interpret rejection not as an inconvenience, but as a threat. And freedom, real freedom, often leads to rejection. Not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just subtle distance, fewer calls, less eye contact, more polite, interesting, when you share your latest decision. This is how autonomy erodes connection. Not because people are cruel, but because your freedom reminds them of their cages. And instead of questioning their lives, it's easier to question yours. So you get hit with that subtle social punishment. You've changed. You're different now. I don't even know what you do anymore. Translation, you no longer fit the mold we had for you. And instead of adjusting their lens, they'd rather pull away. Now you're truly alone. Not because no one loves you, but because the people who used to love you don't know how to love this version of you. That's the hidden cost of autonomy. Not just the decisions, not just the discipline, but the loneliness. And it's why so many people, conscious or not, pull themselves back into conformity. Because independence feels powerful, until it doesn't. Until you're 3 months into your dream lifestyle and you realize you don't know how to explain your life to your parents anymore. Until your old friends stop texting back. Until you realize your freedom makes you unrelatable to the very people who used to feel like home. So what do? You start muting yourself again. You soften your edges. You show only the parts of your freedom that won't raise eyebrows. You post the beach photos, but not the 3 a.m. anxiety about meaning. You talk about your projects, but not the existential drift that follows an unstructured Tuesday. You shrink your truth so people don't feel too far away. That's not freedom. That's solitude dressed
as independence. And it gets worse. Because when you start muting yourself for connection, you teach your nervous system that honesty equals abandonment. Now, every time you tell the truth about your desires, your goals, your path, your body braces for backlash. You hesitate before saying what you really think. You water down your goals so they sound more reasonable. You wait until someone else says it first so you can piggyback off their confidence. You're free, but haunted by the fear of being misunderstood. And here's the paradox. The more self-directed your life becomes, the harder it is to explain. Because true freedom doesn't come with a script. It doesn't sound like, I just got promoted or I'm moving in with my partner. It sounds like, I stopped doing what looked good and started doing what felt real. I turned down a six-figure role because I didn't want to become that person. I changed my entire identity and didn't ask for anyone's input. And most people have no idea what to do with that. They want a story arc. They want milestones. They want linear, measurable progress. And freedom doesn't give them that. Which means you become a glitch in their worldview, an error, a threat. And unless you're deeply rooted in yourself, that discomfort will erode your clarity. You'll start second-guessing yourself, not because you're wrong, but because you're alone. And loudness makes the loudest lies believable. Like, maybe I am just being unrealistic. Maybe I should have just taken the offer. Maybe I'm not built for this. No. What you're feeling isn't failure. It's detachment from the herd. And that's supposed to feel strange. Because belonging and freedom are often opposites. Belonging asks you to blend. Freedom demands you stand. And standing means fewer hands to hold, but clearer ground beneath your feet. Here's the quiet truth. Freedom requires a tolerance for aloneness. Not isolation, not exile, just the ability to move forward without consensus. To believe in your own path even when nobody claps, even when nobody comes, even when nobody understands. And that's what most people run from. Not the effort, not the uncertainty, but the silence. The lack of affirmation. The absence of witnesses. The eerie quiet of, I'm doing this because I said so. But that silence, that's where real authority lives. Not the kind handed to you by status or titles, but the kind you earn by walking forward even when it's dead quiet. Even when your voice shakes. Even when your parents don't get it. Even when your friends think you've lost your mind. Because here's the raw truth. Autonomy is not a group activity. No one can validate your choices before you make them. They only understand after it works. And by then, you won't need their understanding anyway. That's the price. And the reward. But before you can claim it, you have to confront the next fear. Not loneliness, but irrelevance.
So, let's cut to the bone. You've seen people sabotage their own power just to feel approved. You've probably done it yourself, more than once. You get a glimpse of what you could do, what you want to do. Something real, raw, off script. But then you feel it. That ache, that flicker of doubt. What will they think? And just like that, you start editing yourself again. It starts small. You change your word, you soften your tone, you reframe your goals so it sounds more responsible. But what you're really doing? You're shrinking. Not because you're weak, but because you're wired to survive. And for most of your life, survival meant fitting in. Let's be brutally honest. You don't want power if it makes you unlikable. You don't want truth if it means walking alone. You don't want freedom if no one's around to clap for it. So you trade it. You trade your edge for approval, your authenticity for applause, your voice for permission, and then you call it strategy. You pretend it's just being smart, playing the game, or keeping the peace. But deep down, you know exactly what you're doing.
You're shrinking your life so it fits inside someone else's comfort zone. This is how most people lose themselves. Not in one dramatic moment, but slowly, silently, in micro decisions made under the table of validation, in choosing the version of themselves that's easier to digest. Because here's the sick part. Being seen feels so good, we'll morph into whatever gets us that hit. We'll build entire careers around admiration. We'll marry people who validate us. We'll become experts in playing roles that get us the right kind of attention, even if it guts our soul in the process. Ask yourself this: how much of your ambition was born from desire, and how much from desperation to be taken seriously? You think you're chasing success, but sometimes you're just chasing significance. You want your life to matter, and somewhere along the way, you started confusing being admired with being alive. But those aren't the same thing. Here's the twist. The more praise you get, the harder it becomes to change, because now you have something to lose. A reputation, a following, a brand, a narrative. So you stop taking risks. You stop evolving. You stop listening to the part of you that wants to burn it all down and start fresh, because that part threatens the version of you everyone clapped for. And now you're stuck. Successful, but bored. Admired, but invisible. Free, but frightened to act without applause. You've become a prisoner of your own persona. And the scariest part? No one else will break you out. In fact, they'll reinforce the cage. Because your filtered self serves their expectations. Your carefully curated truth makes them feel safe. Your palatable rebellion makes them feel like they're rebelling too, without having to take the actual risk. So if you dare to change, really change, you threaten the whole illusion. And people don't like that. They'll mock you, resist you, unfollow you, ghost you, not because you're wrong, but because you're reminding them of everything they've avoided facing. So you have a choice. Be praised for who you're not, or be free as who you are. And here's the punchline most people can't stomach. Freedom is not compatible with universal approval. The more real you are, the more misunderstood you'll be. The more powerful you become, the more alone you'll feel. The more honest your work is, the less engaging it might be, until it's undeniable. You can't be extraordinary and easily understood. You can't be wildly free and socially frictionless. You can't create new paths without pissing off the people who are still walking the old ones. But here's the secret. When you stop chasing permission, you start channeling power. Not the kind that inflates your ego, but the kind that wakes something ancient inside you. The kind that lets you stand still while the world spins around you. The kind that doesn't flinch when people misunderstand. The kind that doesn't shrink when they stop clapping. You're not here to be agreeable. You're not here to be liked. You're here to remember that no one can give you the permission you keep waiting for. Not your boss, not your parents, not your mentors, not the algorithm. Because if you still need them to say yes, then it's not freedom, it's just a prettier form of dependence. Let that hit. Every time you hesitate to act until someone else approves, you hand them your life. Every time you wait for feedback before trusting your instinct, you forfeit your power. Every time you tone yourself down so you'll still be loved, you reinforce the lie that your full self is too much. You don't need permission, not to take the leap, not to change your mind, not to build something no one else understands yet. You just need to make peace with being misread. Because in the end, the people worth finding, the ones who see you, really see you, won't need you to explain. They'll find you because you chose to be findable. Not by fitting in, but by standing fully in your own light. But that light, it comes at a price. And it's not attention. It's not acceptance. It's not likes or praise or verified badge. The price of that light is everything you thought you needed to be loved. And when you're ready to pay that price, something wild happens. You stop asking, you stop waiting, you stop proving. You just are. And for the first time, the silence feels holy instead of hostile.
Here's the part no one warns you about. When you finally reach freedom, real, radical freedom, it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like floating in space with no tether. No deadlines, no expectations, no applause. No one to impress, no one to disappoint. Just you and your own ability to decide. At first, it's disorienting. Then, it's terrifying. Then, if you can stand the silence, it becomes honest. Because in that space, you discover who you actually are. Not the version you perform for your boss, your parents, your followers, your friends. You start seeing your real motives, not the moral ones, the raw ones. You start seeing how much of your life was outsourced, how often you waited for permission, how many dreams you deferred, not because they were impossible, but because no one had signed off on them. That's when it hits. Freedom was never about escape. It was about authorship. Being the one who writes the rules, the one who answers for them. Not because you have to, because no one else will. And maybe, just maybe, that's what you've been scared of all along.